Hi, my name is Danielle Neely, your host of the Industry Edge podcast, where we talk with leaders working in and for the hardest working industries, such as manufacturing, distribution, construction, and more. This episode is brought to you by KNC Marketing. KNC is a full service marketing agency that helps B2B industrial companies grow their brand and increase sales. They serve as either a fully outsourced marketing partner or a supplement in-house marketing teams. To learn more about KNC's brand development, marketing, and website design services, visit kncmarketingagency.com. Now, before I introduce today's guest, I have to shout out Sean Jones, president of Toyota Material Handling Mid-South, for introducing us to this rock star guest. We've had the opportunity to work with her over the past few years, and I'm just very thankful to know her. With that, so excited to welcome Ginger Duncan, executive coach who helps leaders align with their purpose and strength to lead with confidence and maximize their impact. Her practical, heart-centered approach inspires transformation in business and in life. Ginger, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And thanks for the call out for Sean. You know, I love Sean, so that's great.
He's a rock star, and he connects us with good people. So we gotta shout him out. So yes, so happy to have you.
Thank
So
you.
Ginger, this one's really easy, but tell us a little bit about what you do and kind of how you got started and what the early days of your career looked like.
All right, great. Great place to start. Well, I do executive leadership coaching. So all I do is leadership coaching for executives and leaders, so high potential, top talent, to help them be a little bit better. They're already great, right? I work with people that are already really strong. So my job is just to help them be a little bit better and to hold them accountable to those goals and priorities. I got started a long time ago in my 20s. My mother had a business. She did leadership development. She had a partner named Vivette Payne. Vivette's still with us. My mother's not, but I was in my 20s and they took me with them. We traveled around, did leadership development. Vivette was really my mentor and my coach. Mom was a little too close, so Vivette got that job. And they would give me little pieces of training and development to do, and I would observe and that kind of thing. And so I traveled with them until I had my daughter, who just turned 28. And when I had her, we were doing a really big project out in Houston, and had to be gone for like almost 2 weeks. And when I got back, my mother, we both said, you know what, this is probably in the best time for this, because that kind of work at that time, was way before COVID, right? And so you travel, nothing was virtual.
Yeah.
And when we did work like this, it was weeks at a time. And so you go in and you do a couple of weeks, and it just wasn't going to work for me at that time. And she saw that. And so I pulled back and did industry type training at a local community college. So I still did the same kind of thing, much smaller scale, was home and only worked part-time for a while. So that's how I got started. One of the things that she told me early, when I was really young, is that you need to go work in an organization. You can learn the theory, you can go out and observe people, but until you work in an organization, understand the politics, how things work, how these theories are applied, in real time, what works, what doesn't. You really want to have a true understanding, and you will lack the credibility. Because people say, well, where have you worked? Oh, you just learned it at school. You got all these degrees. Well, that's great. But how does this really work with real people, right? And so I went to work for an organization, head of talent development for around 11 years. I was working in Kentucky then, and they moved me to their corporate location here in Nashville, which is how I got here, Nashville, Tennessee. And so I practiced there and learned, continued to work on my trade, but was home. I had 2 kids then, and always knew I'd go back into this in consulting. I liked it. I like project type work. And when my kids got old enough and I could travel again, this was still pre-COVID, so you did everything, you traveled, right? You didn't do anything virtually. I made the leap.
Zoom what? Like, no, we don't do Zoom.
I know, I swear, like what? Now I can do everything virtually. It's crazy.
Right.
But I jumped back in and kind of dipped my toe in working as a consultant for an organization for a little bit, and then decided to go full on, reached out to you guys. You guys did my website and got me started. And I jumped back into what I'd known since my 20s. And so, been doing this a long time in different areas, in different ways, learned a lot then. And I will tell you, not a lot's different, because people are people. And I will work in organizations, and I always get a kick out of this. People will say, well, our industry is different. We're in healthcare. And I'll say, okay, I'll say okay. And then I'll say, but people are people.
Right.
And my job is to help people and
Hmm.
help organizations, but you help organizations by helping people, right? And so it's really not different. And so now I have my own business. This is what I do all the time. And how wonderful is that, that my business is around helping people be better, great people be better, right? People that want to be better. And so that's how I got started, and that's how I ended up where I am today.
I love that. I love that you're like, you say you're already working with great people, like high performers, like high performing leaders, but you just help them be better. So on that note, like what, are there common roadblocks or like blinders that these leaders tend to have that you've kind of seen over the years? Or is it kind of you like how they, if it's unique, or what are those kind of common roadblocks that you see these leaders have?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sometimes they're individual. They come out individually. I'll say that. But there are certain themes, right? And this is any relationship, whether it's work or home. There's certain themes. What I have found is the people I work with first are high achievers. And
Mhm.
so they always want to be a little bit better.
Mhm. They
That's
already
that's
have it.
one theme, right? They're already great. They're like great. I'm certainly not going to come in and teach them how to do their job. But I can come in and through my process, which we'll talk about in a minute, I can help them get a little bit better. Typical themes I see, lack of clarity. So in their mind, they see a vision. A lot of leaders are very visionary, owners are very visionary,
Mhm.
and translating that into what does that look like on the day to day, and what will a win look like. So
Right.
that translation, getting that out of here to here, clarity on roles and responsibilities, who's doing what. Sometimes there's a lot of redundancy or there's conflict based on, I thought that was my job versus that's this person's job, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Conflict, that's number one. Either too strong or not strong enough. And a lot of leaders that I work with that are really strong with emotional intelligence, sometimes struggle with the strong messaging. That kind of Brene Brown says, direct is kind, that. Because people need to hear that and they want to hear that from a trusted person. And sometimes it's hard for them to do that. So they'll sugarcoat a little bit too much. And so it's not direct enough for them to know this is kind of what we need to do. And I can help facilitate that conversation or teach that skill. Those are typically what I find. One thing that I think is underrated that I see a lot is inconsistency in behavior. And so a leader that's not consistent in their behavior, so sometimes they're all on and then they're all off. So it's hot and cold. It feels kind of fickle, like a fickle
Right.
relationship, right? And that can be very harming to an organization because people don't know. Is it going to be the on week or the off week? Can I hide this week or do I have to really be all in this week? And so that can be really confusing. And so there is a discipline to that that is critical for a leader. And if
Mhm.
you don't have that discipline, the impact is chaos. Not your intention, right? Difference between intention and impact. It's not your intention for it to be chaotic, but it can feel chaotic. And in that, it's hard to focus on priorities. It's hard to manage your or regulate your emotions. It's hard to do all those things when your environment's chaotic. So that discipline around consistency is huge. And I see that more and more. So it's something we work on through
Yeah.
the process. Yeah.
That's interesting. Of like people that already have that stronger emotional intelligence of like kind of training them up of how they can be more assertive and direct in their communication. But then on the flip note, somebody who maybe isn't as aware, like giving them the tools and the stuff they need in order to do that. So like sort of supporting both sides. That's interesting. You talked about your process. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so same process with everybody. And so I do when I start working with somebody, the first thing I do is we get to know each other, conversation. It could be in person, depending on where they live, or virtually. And are we compatible? I mean, this relationship has got to be trust-based. They're going to have to be able to share with me what they're thinking when they're feeling like they failed. And these are people that don't fail often. So it's hard, right? To be able to say, man, I totally messed that up, or I got to own that piece. They got to feel comfortable saying that to me. And I've got to come at it from a place of curiosity and not judgment. So let's talk about what that looks like. Let's unpack that a little bit, right? A
Mhm.
lot of personal stuff comes up in this relationship because they're intertwined. People that tell me they're totally different, whatever. People, People are people, and
Call them BS.
yeah, I got to call BS on that. People are people, and personal life and organizational life, there is some interconnection there. And so that's real. And we'll get into that. So once we see if we're compatible, then the process is I'll tell them to give me a list of people they work with, people on their team, people that report to them, peers. I've had people ask me to speak to their spouse before. Yeah, and all I do is I send a quick email to each of those people, say we're getting ready to start work together, and these are a few questions I want you to think about. And then I schedule a 20-minute Zoom call with that person. I'm really fast. I know how to get in, find out what I need to know, and get notes. I ask questions like, if Danielle wasn't in the room, how would you describe her in 3 words?
Ooh.
What does she value?
Mhm.
How do you know that? What does she talk about? What does she get mad about? Because that's typically a values conflict.
Mhm.
What are her strengths? What are her opportunities for her? If she could be just a little bit better, what would it look like? What would you need a little bit more of, less of? I gather all that data from all those people. I do a report. I would do a report for you. It doesn't say who says what, but it would say all that information that I gathered. People love that. People love that first question of describe because you think you have a sense of how people would describe you, but do you really? And it's very affirming to people to go, wow, it's really nice. Like I feel really good about that. And yeah, and typically on some of the opportunities, people go, yeah, I
Like
kind of
I
knew
agree with
that.
it.
Yeah, I get that, or I can see how they would see that, or I'm not sure how they saw that.
Okay.
And so we'll dig deeper into that. So I give them all that feedback, and then we set goals, and we set what's called 5% action steps. So I'm a 5%er. And what that means is typically when a person sets a goal, they set these huge goals. So think about it in relationship like weight loss. I'm going to lose, 25 pounds in 2 weeks or some ridiculous number.
Mhm.
You're never going to meet it. It's not sustainable. It's not you. It means you have to completely change your lifestyle, right, to do that. Typically, people set really big goals, like I'm going to do this. So what I say in coaching is they overcorrect, and it's weird. So I will say, quit being weird. You're making it weird. Like people are like, Danielle is totally different today than she was yesterday, and that's weird. Don't make it weird. So,
Mhm.
what are your 5% things you're going to do differently in this area? 5% more or less. So, let's say we heard that Danielle needs to work on communication. I can't get a hold of her. She didn't respond. I never know if she read my email or doesn't read my email. Let's say I find that out and I tell you that. So, we're going to set a goal and I'm going to say, what's 5% action step you can start doing today that's just a little bit different to help build that skill? So, what you're doing is you're building a new habit.
Mhm.
And discipline, practice every day, practice every day. Okay, I'm going to respond. You may say, I'm going to respond within 48 hours. Or I'm going to shoot a quick note back saying, got it, I'll respond by Friday. Whatever that is. So we set the goals with the 5% action steps. And then our job is to meet monthly and talk about what are you doing, those 5%. What have you done? And what results are you seeing? What do you like? What do you not like? Is this not working? Do we need to shift it? And we have that kind of relationship. And you build that skill, you build that discipline over time.
Mhm.
At about 6 to 8 months, normally 8, just depends, I'm going to do a recheck in with all those stakeholders. And I'm going to say, Joe, this is what you told me about Danielle specifically, because I know you don't. This is exactly what you said. What have you seen? And normally it's like, oh my gosh, I forgot I said that. I've noticed that she's now responding much quicker than she was before, or whatever that is. And I
Right.
gather that feedback. And then I give you that feedback, not who said what, but here's what people are seeing. And then that causes momentum
Mhm.
because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. People like it. People recognize and value it. They've noticed it.
Right.
And then we start building other skill sets. And so, typically an engagement, 8 months to a year, some continue on. I have a lot of repeat business because it's just a safe place to talk and strategize and think through things. But it is building those new habits for them to be just a little bit better, but not weird.
Like,
A
don't need to,
sustainable habit.
don't change your whole personality on them. Just let's get
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, because sometimes, especially achievers, feel like if they're not perfect, and I say this at the beginning, if you're striving for perfection, give up now because you're not gonna get it. But
Mhm.
they want to be perfect. And so when you tell them something like that, you can tell them 99 things that are great about them. And you say one thing that's an opportunity, and they're hyper focused, and
Right.
they go way over here, and then it's not sustainable because you
Mhm.
got a family and a job and whatever. And so I want people to make it sustainable, but I also want them to develop a habit. And if
Yeah.
it's too big, they won't.
Right.
Yeah.
If you can't achieve, like if it's not something you could do daily, weekly, it's gonna fall off
Yeah.
anyway.
Then
Yeah.
that's the consistency piece, right? And then
Hmm.
people go, oh, she was great for 4 months and now she's back to what she was. And then that erodes the trust in the relationship. Like she's not going to stick to it. She didn't care that I said that. I'm not valuable. And so that's the only way I know how to measure the process. So the return on time invested in money is that I'm going to give you that measurement of here's where you started, here's what you've seen. If it
Hmm.
continue to work longer together, I'm going to do another measurement at some point.
Right.
But it is that check-in and that accountability. And another thing, with leaders is they're so busy they don't take that hour a month or whatever it is to devote to what do they need to do for the business, what conversations they need to have, and think through those. They're in firefight, right, constantly
Hmm.
instead of reflection. Oh
Right.
wow, yeah, I see how if I'd have just added this one word, or if I would have included this group that was impacted, how would have helped that change move a lot faster. Or man, if I'd have just followed up with this person, then
Hmm.
they have that time to reflect and think and build those skill sets.
Yep.
Another thing that I offer in the process to all my clients is called just-in-time coaching. And what that means is, let's say, Danielle, we're not supposed to meet until the 22nd of this month, but today you have a meeting and something blows up, or you're preparing for something, or you need to send an email and you're like, I'm not sure if this is too strong. All of my client has to do is reach out to me, email, text, hey, you got a few minutes. Now, I could be traveling, I could be busy that day, but as soon as I see it, they will get a response that says, Danielle, I've got 15 minutes at lunch, or can I call you from the airport? And we
Hmm.
will talk through that. So I'm there for them. It's a real relationship where I'm there for them when they need me, because a lot of times that's when the real learning happens. Like something just happened and they need
Right.
to reflect, go fix something, like you need to go repair this relationship or you need to do something. They need to do it in that moment and not in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's so true. Especially like you said, they're so busy and they have a million things going on. So it's like to have that like support, like reactionary support when they need it, of somebody that already knows the backstory of kind of how they operate.
Yeah,
That's a huge benefit. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
You talked about values being kind of a critical piece of like what you do and how important it is for these leaders and their organization. How do those like help with the maintaining of those longer term, more fulfilling relationships that they're trying to build, like both personally and professionally? How do those play a part?
It's huge. It's everything. And I'm not talking about right now, I'm not talking about corporate values. They can be wonderful if they're done right. If they're not, what we want, if they're not aspirational and not really what we are.
Right.
I'm talking about personal values. And when you connect with a person at a values level, and not through judgment, not my values are better than yours, but through an appreciation and a respect for that, the connection is much deeper. So I say to people, when you're not truly connecting, there's no commitment. And that can be personal or professional. And what that means is when I really see you and connect with you at a values level, and that's how I respond to you, it's a deeper connection. There's going to be more loyalty there. There's going to be more engagement. There's
Hmm.
going to be more productivity because I feel like I belong here. And so what that looks like is if I'm working with you, I listen to what you talk about. I look at where you spend your time and your money, if it's a relationship, if
Yep.
it's a personal relationship, and what makes you mad. Because what makes you mad is typically a values conflict. So what that means is you get really upset because I didn't include you in an email that I sent to a group of people. So what I'm learning there is inclusion is important to you. Typically, it was a mistake when it happens. People take it as personal. But when
Right.
I have that conversation with you and I understand that's what upset you, then I know that's a value of yours. All I got to do is meet that.
Hmm.
There are a lot of leaders that have a value of needing context. They need to understand why decisions are made. So when decisions are forced upon them all the time and there's no discussion of here's why we're going in this direction, here's going to the impact, here's why we're doing it. When they have that understanding of the story, then they feel included, they understand the why, and they're willing to perform at that level. When they don't, there can be resistance. So it's learning what that value is and feeding the value. If your family is important to you, I'm going to ask you about your family. If time off during the holidays is important to you, we're going to talk about how we can make that happen within reason, right? Because that's a value of yours. And when I feed that, that's where you get loyalty. That's where you get that engagement. And that's where you get people that want to be there and want to work with you and for you. And people I'm finding are not taking the time to do it. So I'll say to them, because when I do the interviews, I'll say, what does Danielle value? When they can't answer that question and they're a leader, because I work with leadership teams, so it may be an entire team. And if I say, what's your CFO? What is your CFO value? And they don't know, I know they're not really connecting with their people.
Right.
So listen, what does he talk about? What does she talk about? What's important to them? What do they get upset about? Take the time to listen so you can connect there and just talk to people about it. It takes 2 seconds and people feel valued, right? And a part of something. It's huge. And you think about that. You can think about that in personal relationships. When the connection's not there, the commitment's gone.
Yep.
And in professional relationships. So, we've heard this quiet quitting and all this stuff, right? Yeah. People don't feel connected. And when they don't feel connected, they're going through the motion, right? But there's no true connection to the organization, to that leader, to that team. And it's going to be an issue if people don't learn how to do that.
Yeah.
Read an article a couple weeks ago, and it was talking about, it's actually on LinkedIn. I wish I knew the author, but it was talking about, we moved from a goods economy, so selling things, to an intellectual or knowledge economy. It's what you know. Now we're moving into what's called relationship economy, because we got AI, we got things that are going to think for us. Now it's going to be the people that can have relationships, that can build those relationships and pour into them. A lot of the younger generation wasn't taught that, because it's all about what you know and learning the tactical parts of their job, the transactional, instead of the truly connecting relational piece. When you think about leaders in the future and the ones that are going to be really, really successful, it's going to be the ones that have a combination of I know what I'm doing and I can connect with people. And it is going to have to be taught. It's going to be huge. That emotional intelligence piece, reading the room, watching people, connecting with people, making people feel valued and want to be there, but also ensuring they're performing and things like that. So it's not an either or, it's an and, but it's going to be huge.
Totally. It's like what they say, it's not about what the person said, it's about how they made him feel. That's so huge. It's like you're not going to remember that, but if it connects with you and it makes you feel something, that's going to make you remember that conversation and go, wow, that person knew what they were talking about. And they might not have, but if they made you feel something,
yeah.
Yeah,
and you think about 20 years from now when people are talking about you, what do you want your legacy to be? I mean, do you want your legacy to be, man, I remember that I worked with Danielle and we had a strong business. We built this business and it was incredible. We had so much fun. We were doing it, it was hard work, but we did it. And I really felt connected to her and she took care of me. And I remember this time I was sick and she jumped in and did my work and we just took care of each other. We had fun. We built this great business together. That's what you want your legacy to be, not just, I was worked with this woman named Danielle and we had a good business, but
I don't remember her last name.
I don't remember her last name.
Yeah.
I worked with that woman, she had blonde hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Yep. I don't want that. I want a little bit more. I want the first one for sure. And that's what people want. So it's like, how do you, when you think about it, like what would somebody say at your funeral? If you think about what do you want your legacy to be, it's like taking a million steps backwards to being like, what are the steps that I need to take in order to have that? It's treating people right, listening. You talked a lot about like kind of staying curious as a leader. So talk to me a little bit more about that. Like, how does that like constantly staying curious about people, how does that help build the deeper connections that they need to kind of help think through?
I love that. I love that a lot. I use that a lot because people have a tendency, we all do this because we're human, is to look at things through a judgmental lens. Right, wrong, not doing it my way, so you're not doing it the right way. I don't know why you said that, so I'm making up some story about why you said what you said, instead of, wow, that's interesting. I'm curious about that. What was that about? was there something I said that kind of rubbed you the wrong way? Or I never really thought about looking at it that way. Can you talk me through, how you came up with that? So I understand. Just a
Mm-hmm.
curiosity instead of judgment. When
Mm-hmm.
people feel judged, they shut down. It doesn't mean you don't tell people no, we're not going to go in that direction. That's not what judgment is. Judgment is feeling like I'm wrong, I did bad, right? And so the whole curiosity around, wow, that's interesting. I never thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
How can we look at that differently? Or I don't see it that way. Talk me through how you see that. That's curiosity. It's not closing a conversation, it's opening it to understand. It's that seek to understand from Covey. It's the same stuff. How do you do that in a way where people feel truly connected and safe to say things to you? Now, doesn't mean you don't have difficult conversations. People think sometimes to make it safe, you don't have difficult conversations. You have to. But if
Right.
it's safe and I don't feel judged, I don't leave there feeling shame or stupid or whatever that is. Then
Mm-hmm.
I go, okay, this was an ouch, didn't feel great, but I learned something, I understand it. And they weren't mean about it or judgmental. They were helpful and they educated me. That's
Yep.
very different. And sometimes because time is an issue with people, we're really direct, get in, get in, get in, and we don't take the time on some of those conversations we should. And people leave feeling hurt and they shut down.
Mm-hmm. How do you like when somebody, because you're a business owner, I'm a business owner, it's like you're right, it's like that direct, you can be direct, you might not always take the time. What are the types of like pieces of advice and training that you give these leaders to be able to like kind of shift their perspective and make them start doing that? Is that like part of the check-ins as well of like having them take down notes, or how do you keep them accountable for those kinds of things?
Yeah, depending on what they're dealing with, I'll give them tools and ask them to go try it.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, with a difficult conversation, what I find is people are using judgment words. And so they say things like, you were rude, you were lazy and didn't finish, or it's implied, you didn't finish that project on time, you're not organized. Instead of using what I call very specific, behaviorally specific feedback. So I say to you, instead of you were lazy or you're not organized, I say, Danielle, I asked for that report by Friday and I didn't get it until Tuesday the following week. That's very specific.
Mm-hmm.
That will cause behavioral change more so than putting a label on it and judging it.
Yep.
The next piece of that is this was the impact. Because of that, I ended up having to work all weekend because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have that report. Or it was late getting to the client, and now the client's questioning whether they want to work with us.
Mm-hmm.
Or now this other team in the other department, now sales is frustrated with us in operations because we didn't deliver when we promised. And so in the future, I need you to deliver by that deliverable date or give me a heads up before so we can get a team put together to help you. That's a very different conversation than you failed, you were disorganized, and next time you need to do it right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right? And so it's that whole curiosity versus judgment. It's also very specific, behaviorally specific. If I ask a person if I'm doing interviews and they say, well, Danielle, she's just not a good communicator. I'm gonna say, I gotta know more than that. That does not tell me anything. So what is she doing specifically that makes you think she's not a strong communicator? Tell me behaviorally, what does it look like?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't make eye contact, whatever that is. That's what I need to know because those are the behavioral things that I want to try to shift in that person to make them a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
But they got to be specific, and people a lot of times don't take the time or they don't plan the conversation, and so they're uncomfortable with it, and so they don't get specific enough, or they sugarcoat. I just need you to be a little bit better. Next time do better. Well, tell me specifically what is it you want.
Yep. Yep. People
Well,
like a clear outline with, in those instances, you need to be direct about what it is. Yep.
yeah, because they'll call me, we'll get on a call and they'll say, I got feedback from my leader or my peer about this, and I still don't know what they were talking about. I'm like, what have you asked them? No. Call them back and
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, I just want to circle back. We had a conversation the other day and you said this, and I'm curious, what exactly do you want more of or
Mm-hmm.
less of? So you sometimes just drilling in, what is that thing you want a little bit more of versus less of? And when they tell you that, then you got the cheat sheet, right? This is how I know how to be successful with this person. And then you just do it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's reasonable and you can, why wouldn't you?
Right. It's
Yeah. If I
asking
know
the
what's
question.
important to you, why wouldn't I give that to you? Whether I'm married to you or dating you or working for you.
Yeah. People want to learn how to mind read instead of just asking sometimes. It's like
Just,
a relationship. They're like, I just want them to do it. I'm like, well, they can't read your mind. So
and they're
it's
not going to.
yeah, did you, especially in work? I'm like, maybe your husband's really good or your wife's really good, but in most cases, you just need to talk to them about it. So
Well,
that,
and really all cases, right?
hmm
I mean, any relationship, because if and I had to learn this as I got older, is that, expecting somebody to be a mind reader. And my husband told this to me when we got together. He said, if you're ever expecting me to be a mind reader, I'm just going to tell you now, I'm not going to be. So I need you to be direct and blunt and just tell me, and I'll do it. And he will. Like,
yeah.
give me the answers to the test. I'll pass the test, but don't quiz me on something I don't even know I'm being tested on, right?
hmm
Um, and just it's the way you connect with people that way. It's just sharing that information. This is what I need and like. What do you need and like? And we give it to each other if
Yep.
within reason, right?
Right. Yep. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
What are some like you talked about, the visionary versus like the integrator? Like what are some of the things like if you can give me some examples of, strong visionary has the vision but doesn't know how to like pull the right people or the right teams. How has your work with those types of leaders helped them kind of maybe lean into more of the integrator side? Because I've read what I forget the book, but the integrator and the visionary, and
Yeah.
it's very different and they're both very needed. But how do you get them to kind of lean into more of that integrator role, or what is it that you do?
Typically, I don't have them do that. So
Okay,
that's,
not that.
that is in the EOS book, which is in Entrepreneurial
Mm-hmm.
Operating Systems, which I love, and I recommend to a lot of leaders, like go do this with your team.
Mm-hmm.
And if I've got a strong visionary leader, I will say who on your team could be the
Is
integrator. And
yeah.
let's get them ready, right? Who is that? Who do you trust? Now, it's really hard for business owners to do that because it's their baby, right? It's like they want to, own all the pieces. But they typically can't scale if they do that. They can't get much bigger. It's just there's too much work to be done. And so it's getting the right person. Normally it's not, this doesn't need to be the same person. And sometimes you have integrators who need visionary. They can't see what we could be. And so how do you match up people on your team, find people on your team or hire for that have that skill set to help you get there?
Mm-hmm.
And that the EOS system is a wonderful way to do it because it's facilitated conversations around what are those big rocks we're moving, what are the steps we're going to take, and it's a tracking of that so you
Mm-hmm.
know what the priorities are and you got people assigned to those because a lot of times we set priorities but we don't assign anybody to do it and everybody thinks everybody else is doing it and nobody's doing it and then we just meet about the same thing every month.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
I know that.
that's a discipline, right? The OS system is a discipline
Mm-hmm. I love
around that.
that.
Yeah.
What are some like tangible, results that companies feel the impact of after your work with working for some of these leaders for a period of time?
It depends on their goals, but it's meeting their goals. People get a little better. If I work with entire teams, which I do a lot of, I can facilitate those conversations that are difficult and bring people together when they might not have been able to do it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm saying, hey, have you thought about reaching out to so and so and talking about this? Get that going. Or, hey, I've heard this consistently with your team this month. What's going on? Do you think maybe you need to follow up and check in? So it's information they might not know, and I can facilitate those conversations, which is helpful. Probably the biggest benefit is the pre-stakeholder and post-stakeholder interviews because people get that feedback that's real. And then they have a choice as an adult if they want to do anything about it, right? And so it's that personal growth, which professional growth, which typically bleeds into personal too,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not different, right? And so it's that kind of change. So you hope that you can help an organization get stronger at performing, so
Mm-hmm.
their business goes up, right? Their sales go up, or whatever business they're in. They become more efficient and effective in the way they communicate. You hope it leads to retention of top players because they feel like they're valued enough to be coached and they're getting better at what they do and they're working better as a team. And then you hope they're more engaged because
Mm-hmm.
they feel more a part of something, and valued because they're getting that one-on-one help, in an area to get them a little bit better. And like I said, I'm typically working with people who are achievement oriented. So when that's not being fed, then people will look for it somewhere else. And so if you can feed that within your organization, people go, wow, I feel valued. I'm growing. I can grow my career now because of that. And this is someplace I want to be.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
price tag for that, right?
Right.
Retention, engagement, better performance,
Right.
happier.
And it all starts with like being curious, having that conversation, like knowing how to have those conversations, being emotionally intelligent about how you're coming across to your organization. Well, it starts in here and then
It
how it
does.
comes out. So,
It does. And balancing that transactional type work we have to do with the emotional piece, the relationship piece. It's not an either or, it's absolutely an and. If you're only focused on relational, you have a lot of fun, you don't get anything done. If you're only focused on the transactional day-to-day tasks, you get a lot done, you wear a lot of people out, right? People are exhausted, they're burned out, they'll go somewhere else. They don't feel connected to the cause. It's
mhm,
both. So it's having what I call ROB, which is relationship oriented behaviors, and TOB, which is task oriented behaviors, a combination of those, and not SOB, which is self oriented behaviors. And self oriented behaviors are anything that I do that only feeds my ego, doesn't help the team, it doesn't help anybody in the organization, and it can actually derail an organization. So you want the ROB, you want the TOB, and not the SOB.
yep,
And so my job is to help them lower the SOB tendencies and increase the other two.
yep. I love that. I've not heard that acronym from you, I don't think yet. I love that. That's a really good
Quit
one.
being an SOB, Danielle. I'm
I
just
know.
kidding.
It's not, I know, we know what the other one means. So you know what? It could be a little bit of that too. So I love that. Well, I have one more question. So
Okay.
if somebody like, a client is in this kind of moment, like feeling like they need your kind of support, what would you tell them? Like, what would be the first step if they were to just kind of reflect? What would be the first thing that you would tell them to do? Like if they're feeling burnt out, they're losing employees left and right. They're disengaged, like their organization isn't where it wants to be. What piece of advice would you tell them?
I would tell them to really reflect on what's really going on. What are those symptoms, right? It's like go to a doctor, what are the symptoms? What are the main pain points and what are potential solutions? Do they have the answers and they just haven't taken the time to think through it? Do they need external support? External support could be executive coach. External support could be an EOS facilitator. It could be sometimes a therapist. I mean, there's lots of external supports to help you prioritize where you need to focus. When things get that way, people feel overwhelmed, right? And you go into typically fight or flight. And so you don't really know where to focus. So having another person to talk to can be a really good friend, a mentor, somebody that you've known forever that's had a business or that's just live life that you respect and go have coffee with them and say, here's what I'm struggling with. Have you ever dealt with this? What did you do? What did you do? What was your first step? What
Mm-hmm.
you do to kind of quiet the noise and get focused? You may have friends that will be a wonderful resource to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Find somebody to talk it through, external to you,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have all that's going on in here. It's separate. That's why a coach or an external person is great because they're not emotionally connected to the stuff that's going on. She wants somebody that's distant from that to be able to look at it through their eyes and go, well, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I'm hearing, or have you thought about trying this, or here's what I did, or I wouldn't do this, right? Don't do this.
Yeah.
Figuring that out before you move forward. But find that person that you can trust to talk through, and it doesn't have to be somebody you pay for. It can be a really good friend, mentor, parent, good
Mm-hmm.
friend, right?
Yep. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
Sometimes I can tell you what I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you a couple things that didn't work. I think people are very quick to tell you. So that's very true. Like lean on the people that you already have and then see and go from there and just being open about it for sure.
Absolutely. And sometimes just saying it and getting off your chest makes you feel better. So sometimes just saying it, you'll come up with a solution, right? Talking through it externally. I have people do that. They'll call me and we'll talk through something. They'll say something I'm like, it's great. Do that. Like, you don't need me for that. That's a wonderful solution. Go do it. And then let's talk about what results you got.
Right.
But sometimes we hold it all in thinking if we share this with somebody, it's going to make us look weak or seem weak. It's not weakness. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually the really smart people that do that because they know they can't know everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they want to grow from others and learn from others. So they initiate that reach out. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to do.
Yep. That is
Yeah.
hard. It's when you're working with high performers. I'd say a lot of Enneagram threes and eights in your world, huh? The
Yeah.
yeah, I would guess so. That makes sense. Well, I love that. So I'm going to just wrap it all up. So we've been talking with Ginger Duncan, owner of Ginger Duncan Executive and Leadership Coaching. So Ginger, can you tell the people where they can find you?
Yeah. Well, my website that you guys designed, gingerduncan.com, where you can see some testimonials. You can read the kind of work I do. You can reach out through there, or email me. My information's on the website, and I'd love to have a quick call with anybody that's interested in exploring coaching, and we'll just talk about it and see if it's a fit. If it's not a fit with me, I can introduce you to some other people, and it could be a fit. It could be a fit there. So,
Awesome. Thanks
yeah,
so much for your time. This was amazing. I really appreciate it.
it was fun. It's so good to see you.
All right. Thanks, Ginger.